Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. The e-petition is focused on our humanitarian obligations in Gaza. Over 600 people from my constituency of Dewsbury and Batley signed the petition, along with over 200,000 across our nation. And one ask, which my honourable friend mentioned in her opening remarks, was there is an immediate need for delivery of aid with or without Israeli support. This is the key point. Since the ceasefire began, the situation has remained deeply unstable and deadly. And in my mind, the only positive that has come from this ceasefire has been the release of the hostages living and the return of the remains of those that were killed. Apart from that positive, Israel has continued its relentless attack and murder and starvation of women, children and men with impunity. Israel, since the ceasefire on October the 10th, there's an estimated 497 Israeli violations that have been documented in the last 44 days. Around 342 Palestinians have been slaughtered and nearly 875 injured, most of them women, children and elderly. The violations include 140 incidents of direct gunfire at civilians and homes, 220 plus bombardments by air, land and artillery, 21 ground incursions beyond the agreed yellow line, and 100 demolitions of homes and civilian structures, the very few that were remaining. And the continued blockade of aid being used blockade of humanitarian aid being used as a weapon of genocide. The need for aid pre this current conflict, before October the 7th, just for basic needs to be met, was 500 trucks per day going into Gaza. These were majority distributed by UNRWA across Gaza for decades, for many, many years. Throughout 2024 and early 2025, an average of between only 36 and 100 trucks a day of aid have entered Gaza. I will give way.
Thank you for giving way. Would you agree with me that it is now, with immediate urgency, that this government needs to work with international partners to deliver the aid that is required through a military-led humanitarian corridor so that no aid can be blocked by Israel?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. We must do whatever it takes to get aid into Gaza to stop the people dying of starvation, to get medical aid to stop people dying from treatable illnesses and injuries. And this government and all its allies must work together to not just remove and get aid into Gaza, but any involvement of Israel in Gaza must be immediately removed. They must not have any part to play in this peace plan. They are the perpetrators of a genocide. How can they be allowed to participate in the distribution or the implementation of a peace plan that will save lives in Gaza? So what the peace plan said was that a minimum of 600 trucks a day would be allowed into Gaza to support the over 2 million people for their basic needs. However, much more than that is needed as a result of the complete annihilation of Gaza, its infrastructure and its medical facilities. Malnutrition exceeds 90%, and the IPC Level 5 famine classification was reached in July of this year. The UN says that the current pace of less than 100 trucks a day, it would take 6 months just to deliver the pre-positioned aid that's at the borders. UNRWA estimates that on average, there has been a maximum of 150 to 170 trucks a day of aid. So the ceasefire has done little to stabilise access to essential services. We've heard the Gaza health system remains on the brink. Hospitals and clinics continue to be understaffed, undersupplied and under threat. UNICEF and other agencies warn that the collapse of medical infrastructure means even treatable illnesses can become life or limb-threatening. People continue to starve as aid is held up by the government. The pattern we are seeing is stark. Even with a supposed truce, children are being killed, people are being wounded, and violations continue with impunity. I've said in the chamber, and I will repeat again, Israel does not want peace. It doesn't want the Palestinians to have their state, and its plan of complete extermination of the Palestinian people is continuing to be enacted before our very eyes. Over 2 years, 26th month that we're in now, we must act now to get Israel out of Gaza and get all the aid that's waiting at the borders in, and to provide all the supplies to start rebuilding not just the buildings in Gaza, but people's lives. So the violation of international humanitarian law continues unabated. The ceasefire was never cure, but it was an opportunity for real, sustained protection of civilian life from Israeli bombardment. So we must demand that Israel adheres to the pause in hostilities, not just in name, but in practice. Aid must be allowed immediate, unfettered, and to deliver food, water, medicine, and critical services. So our moral responsibility demands more than words. I am so sorry to say this, but since I became an MP and I've been in Parliament, I haven't seen a concrete step by our government that I believe has saved lives. The millions of pounds in aid that has been allocated to helping Gazans has been sat at the borders. Our supply of weapons, parts for F-35, has continued. The amount of weapons that were sold to Israel since this government came to power is 4 times as much as over the last 3 years of the previous government. So all these complicity and our active participation in these atrocities must stop, and the government, please, must act immediately to get aid in. Thank you very much.
Lizzie Collins.